Hi, I'm Benjamine Lester, figurative painter and portrait artist. I was gonna answer some questions for y'all today. Y'all were kind enough to submit some questions that you would like answered, to my Facebook group Lester Art. So thank you so much for that. And so I'm going to do my best to get through as many as possible. If I didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry, but feel free to ask me online. I'm very interactive with my members, so if you have a question for me, feel free to ask, and I will get to that and address your questions. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I'm looking at my Facebook group. So the first question that I have is from K. Keith Parsons. Thank you, Kay. Do you have any drawing aids? Drawing aids. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by drawing aids, but I do have some techniques for drawing that I use. I'll either use like a grid technique where I put a grid on my reference photo and then on my canvas as well, and just kind of match up to the grid, which is very, very useful. If I'm drawing from life, I'll like sight size, which is a very useful technique as well. There's other techniques where you just kind of like freehand, which I'm terrible at. There are some artists that are great at that, and I applaud them, but unfortunately for me, I do not have that skill, and I think I get by without it. So yeah, grid technique usually. That's usually the technique that I'm using. Michael Cook asks, do you draw directly on your canvas, or do you do a drawing then transfer it to the canvas? That's a great question, Michael. So I used to do full value drawings on paper, transfer that onto tracing paper, and then put that on my canvas. That's how I started. That's the way that the masters did it. I know that that's very academic to do it that way. But I have kind of moved forward from that. Now I'm just drawing directly on the canvas. I do charcoal pencils. Graphite will actually show through oil paint, kind of the nature of the chemical. It'll just kind of bleed through. So rather I use the charcoal, which just kind of blends into the paint as you put it on, so it doesn't cause any problems or any damage or anything. So hope that answers that for you. So Francisco asked, do you use natural light or you play with artificial light? A couple of different ways I can take that. With my photo shoots with my models, I'll use... I have a whole lighting setup that I'll put in. So, natural light doesn't quite give me the dramatic effect that I like in my paintings. So I'll use artificial lights for that. As far as the actual painting, I am blessed to have in my studio big windows that I can paint right in front of, and it's north light, which is fantastic. So I have a good long range of time during the day that I can use that natural light. So I'm blessed to have that. I also combine that with some additional lighting as well, just in case I want to paint on until the night, or if I need, if it's like a dreary day, or if the light's not quite right, cloudy or whatnot, for the painting process. I have artificial lights as well that I can use for that. So Tom Wright asks, how do you decide how to light your compositions, and what kind of light do you use? That is a great question. Thank you, Tom. So as far as lighting, I really like some dramatic lighting, and to achieve that, what I like to do is I like to have one source lighting, to where I have one strong light that casts shadows over my figure. I like to kind of move the figure to where the shadows are cast along the figure, so there's a lot of transitions over the figures, or really kind of create that dramatic effect that I like in my paintings. And what kind of light do I use? Well, let me show you. Hold on just a moment. So I got this guy right here. You see, he's very, very bright and very useful. So I use that. I don't know the brand or anything like that, but it was inexpensive. which is very important. And just on Amazon photography lighting. So that's what I use for that. So Francisco asks, do you have a defined palette? I do. So I have other colors that I might use, just kind of throw in now and again, but mostly I just use as my primary colors. I use ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow, cadmium red. And then for my neutral primaries, I'll use burnt umber for my neutral blue. I'll use burnt sienna, which is a gorgeous red. It's probably my favorite color ever. Burnt sienna for my red. And then for yellow, I'll either use yellow ochre for my neutral yellow or raw sienna, which the raw sienna is a little bit deeper and the yellow ochre is a little bit lighter in value. So I'll use those. And then of course, Payne's Gray I'll use for black, which is very, very dark blue. And then titanium white, and that's my palette. So yeah, just those 8 colors, and you can pretty much mix anything that you want using those 8 colors. So that's what I use. Jeffrey asks, your use of colors and shading, what inspires you? Well, thank you for that. What inspires my colors? Well, my kind of the mood of the piece that I'm looking for. If I'm looking for something very awe-inspiring, that might affect the color choice that I use, or if I'm using something that's more introspective and reflective, then I'll adjust that as well. I don't like a lot of like big bright colors. If you notice that my work tends to be rather muted, and I use contrasting colors to create that drama rather than just kind of blasting you with color in the piece itself. So that's kind of my technique with that. Francisco asked, do you use pictures or live models? I use photography exclusively when I'm doing figure work. The very, very beginning, I used to do like life drawing or whatever, but as far as like professional work, I don't want to put my models through that. Typically with live models, you do 3-hour sessions for as many times that you can, and it's like 80 hours that you'll need that model for, over a period of weeks. And I just don't know the people that have that kind of time to dedicate to my art. So I just do photography, and I just need like an hour or 2 of their time, and then they're kind of snap, and they're out. So thank you so much for that, Francisco. Adelaide, my good friend Adelaide, thank you, Adelaide. Do you use certain models for specific subject matter, or do the models inspire the subject matter? That is a great question. Both. Typically, my standard process is I will have an idea of a feeling, a mode of expression that I want to do in a piece, and I'll know the look, the type of person that I need for that piece, and I'll just like keep an eye out for them as I go throughout my day. And there's been many times where I've like seen just like, oh, that idea that I've had, that model will be perfect for. And so I'll just approach them and say, hey, I know this is creepy, but here's my card. I'm an artist. If you'd like to model, call me. And that's typically how I get a lot of my models that way. There's very seldom I'll like see somebody and just say, oh my God, I have to do them. I need to get them in my studio, and just have a fantastic idea that model is the only one that's going to use for. I've had that happen a few times. It's really great, but typically no. I'll have the idea first, and then I'll find the model and get them in to do it. So, Angela, I miss you, Angela. We need to hang out. Anyway, how many pictures does it take to get the perfect one? That's a great question, and there is no perfect picture. So when I'm doing a photo shoot, I will take hundreds of pictures, just one after the other, and then I will go through, and it's impossible to find a picture where everything in the picture is where you need it to be, where the hands are in the right position, to where the facial expression is right, to where the body position is in the pose that you need to convey the message that you want. So what I will do is, rather than try to create the impossible with that perfect picture, I will actually use programs like Procreate, and I will pull pieces out of each photo and then put those together into the actual piece that becomes the painting. So it'll be a hand from one painting, it'll be a shoulder from another, a facial expression. I've even broken it down to where like the lips were from one picture and the eyes were from another, and so just kind of a Frankenstein into the perfect image to use for that painting. So thank you so much for that, Angela. David Peters asks, how old were you when you started drawing? 3 or 4. My mom gave me a set of professional grade pencils when I was very, very little. I used to draw mermaids and unicorns. I was a little gay kid. And so yeah, very, very young age that I started drawing. Francisco asks, where did you study? I didn't. I am autodidactic, which means self-taught. So I just decided that I fell in love with painting, and it's something that I wanted to do, and I actively learned the techniques that the old masters were using. I used YouTube, the internet, lots of online resources, and practice, just decades of practice. And took a really active, engaged study on my own to learn these techniques and to get to where I was able to master that. So thank you for that, Francisco. Not to knock down anybody that's done like formalized training. I know many people that have degrees in fine art or have done atelier training, and those are fantastic. There's a lot of shortcuts that I really had to just plummet through where they were guided. So I got to navigate around that. So I just did the things that I wanted to do. I had to figure out the skills that I wanted to have and practice those. So thank you. Bob Personette asks, what artist and time period influenced you as to the way that you paint? I am a huge fan of the Baroque period. I think those artists were doing some amazing things. Now I know what you're thinking. I'm not a fan of all of Baroque. There's some very gaudy Baroque art out there that I'm not a huge fan of. Velázquez, I love his work. Rembrandt, his use of lighting. If you can see, I borrow a lot of from Rembrandt. Caravaggio is a huge influence on my work. That dramatic one-source lighting is very Caravaggioan. So that period I really love. The Italian Baroque, the Dutch Baroque period. I can look at that all day long. What was the subject of the first painting you feel solidified your current painting style? There's several. I think Barbershop was the first large-scale oil painting that I felt was indicative of the art that I'm doing now, and everything that I've done since that painting went in a separate direction. If you kind of look at my work up until Barbershop, I was all scattered in different directions, but once I hit Barbershop, it all congealed into one unified voice from there. So yeah, I think Barbershop would be that turning point painting for me. Which painting do you feel most satisfied in how it turned out? I don't. I am my biggest critic. I don't think any of my paintings turn out. I just hope that other people like them. Sometimes when I'm really tired, or I might like walk into my art studio and think just like, hey, that turned out really well. But most of the time I'm very critical of my own work. So satisfied, I wouldn't say not. I do okay. Michael asks, what is the average time for each piece? Depends on the size. Depends drastically on the size. Typically, the work that I've been doing now, it'll take me up to maybe 80 hours of actual painting time and then 3 to 4 months of like drawing time. So from the time of conception to actual completion, you're looking at about 4 or 5 months for that process. Francisco asks, do you have a target audience? This is something that I actually had to look at. This is really important as an artist or creator or anybody that's in marketing, is to know who your clients are and how to market to your client base. My collectors, they tend to be men, gay men, between 25 and 60 typically. So that's kind of where I put my marketing to, is that age range. But I think anybody would like my art. So if you're a 16-year-old girl and you want to buy one of my paintings, I'm all for that. So I hope that answered your question. Would you describe your art as homoerotic? No, I wouldn't. I do male nudes, but I think that I'm very respectful. I think there's a lot more to the male form than just sexuality, and I don't think that nudity definitely implies sexuality. I like to I like to explore different aspects of the male form. Which that kind of brings me into the next question. What can you say about the naked form? In my art, nudity represents your authentic self. So when I'm painting somebody nude, I'm painting them as being who that they truly are. That there's no costume to them. That there's nothing that they're concealing. That they are just living their truth. So that's what nudity means to me. So as far as like expressing sexuality through nudity, that's not what my art is intended to do. Of course, as the audience, it's your job to make that distinction. So if you find it sexually charged or whatever, then then good for you. But that wasn't my intent now. So that's all my questions that I have. This was so much fun. Thank you for submitting those. And if you have any more questions, just put them in the comments below. And anyway, thank you.